Today, I'm going to share with you a little tale about how self-doubt, panic, shame, and a seventh grade haircut all came together. Welcome. I'm Peggy Oliveira. Thanks so much for joining me. Relatively recently, I had an experience in which my reaction, my response, really surprised me. And it was not pleasant. It was a little challenging for a little while there. But I wanted to share this with you because I think that it's something that a lot of you will probably be able to relate to on some level. Details might be different, but I think some of you will be able to relate to it. And I think it's also kind of a real example of how life can happen. And no matter how much healing you've done, and this is why it's kind of an ongoing journey and a process, and nothing will ever feel perfect, how things can end up coming up and bring back some of those old thoughts, beliefs, and even reactions and responses. And then kind of the difference of what it looks like when it happens when you are kind of on the other side of healing. So I'm going to give a little backstory first. So some of you are going to be very aware of this, but 4.5 years ago or so, I decided to stop coloring my hair. This was before COVID, but I had decided I was going to stop coloring my hair, and the primary reason I colored my hair was to cover the gray. And I started doing that in my mid-20s. I had a few gray hairs and I started coloring it. And I didn't really know anything about gray hair other than it was something you were supposed to do. But, and I think this might be something that people can relate to as well a little bit. But I knew that I had quite a bit of silver at the top. And I assumed that once I stopped coloring my hair, that my natural color would be all basically that silver color. And as it continued to grow, I was just kept waiting for it. And eventually I got all the color, the pre-color that I had in there. I had all of that cut out, and my hair did not look at all what I anticipated. And I liked it on one hand, but the longer it went on, the less I liked it. So depending on the lighting, it can look very different. And you may have noticed a difference if you watched a lot of my videos. But I was really kind of struggling with ultimately the way that it looked, because on the very top of my head, it felt very silvery, just kind of at the crown. And then under that, this section here, all seemed very dark, but kind of ashy. So the pepper, I didn't realize that your hair actually grew in as pepper. I thought pepper was just your previous natural color. But the natural hair growing in was very cool toned and quite dark. And then I had this underlayer that was kind of at the bottom around that was basically my original natural color, which is a dark brown with a lot of warmth in it. So I felt like I had 3 different heads of hair basically, and it was all kind of sectioned out, and it was really bothering me. I felt like it just didn't go together well. I felt like it just didn't, there was certainly no blending in it. It was all very dark on the bottom 2/3 and pretty light on the top. So I just didn't like it for a while. I also, though I did really like the freedom of not coloring my hair. So I'd been going back and forth for a while about coloring it. The last, I don't know, probably a handful of times I got it cut. I talked with a stylist about potentially coloring it and what they would suggest and that sort of thing. But I never did it. Well, relatively recently, I decided I wanted to do something because it was really bothering me. Doing videos, even the short videos, I end up seeing myself on videos quite often. And again, depending on the light, it can look quite different. So I made an appointment. I went in. I was second guessing myself. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't do this. When I went in, I thought, well, I'm going to talk to this person, see what they think, see what their suggestion is, but I don't have to do it. So I kind of was still going back and forth. And that part is kind of important here. So I talked to her. I told her what my concerns were. I asked her what her recommendation would be. She suggested something. She actually suggested a couple different options. And I said, so if I hadn't told you anything, and I came in and I said, I feel like I need something, what would you suggest? And I basically ended up going with what she suggested, which addressed my concerns. So I did it. And as she walked away to go mix the color, I started feeling anxious. Like, am I doing the right thing? Maybe this is a bad idea. Like I was feeling, I wouldn't say really anxious, but I was definitely feeling uneasy. And she came back and she's with a tray of color and the foils. And it's like, oh my God, I'm going to do this, which is so weird to me because I've been coloring my hair for a very long time and had some pretty bad dye jobs before. But I was really nervous. And that kind of surprised me a little bit too, just how nervous I was. So anyway, after she was done, one kind of important part here for me is that she didn't have time to blow dry my hair natural, curly. So she had to blow dry it out. And it always looks quite a bit different because I wear my hair curly virtually every single day. And so that always is going to look a little different. So she finished it and I was feeling like, I don't know about this, but I had other things to do. I needed to go. And she said, if it feels too, I think she said, if it feels too light, we can put some low lights in it. Just, give it a few days. Let me know what you think. So I left, and lighting in a salon is often quite different than it is out in natural light. And I saw it in the rearview mirror and I was like, oh my God. And I wasn't quite sure what to think. It wasn't good. What I was feeling was not good. And after that, I was going actually to the mall, which I hadn't been to a mall in years, because I was looking for an outfit for a speaking workshop thing I was going to be doing. And this is also important. The reason I keep saying these pieces are important is because I talk all the time about levels of vulnerability or layers of vulnerability, right? So I have to go to the mall and find an outfit. And I went into the first dressing room, and women in particular, I think you can certainly relate to this. Dressing room lighting, and it just not a good place when you're feeling kind of vulnerable, right? And I looked in the mirror as I hung my stuff up, and I saw myself in the mirror, big 3-way mirror, and was like, oh my God, what have I done? And I just kind of looked at it and I was like moving it from side to side and just like, oh my God, what have I done? This looks horrible. I really screwed up. And those kinds of thoughts were literally going through my mind. Those are the kinds of thoughts that I used to have a lot as a kid, not just about hair, but about anything and everything. I made a mistake, I screwed up, I'm going to get in trouble. Like all of those things went together. And as I'm looking at my hair and thinking, oh my God, what have I done? The panic started to rise. Now, I didn't have a panic attack. It wasn't to that degree, but I felt hot. I felt this intense energy starting to rise up. And I recognized the feeling was very familiar to how I used to feel as a kid so often, feeling like I was going to get in trouble. And I would feel that if I did do something wrong, but I would also feel that often, even if I hadn't really done anything wrong, but maybe was worried that somebody might be unhappy with me or something like that. So this feeling starts to come up, and this feeling is very familiar to me. Fortunately, been a long time since I felt it, but it was familiar. And as is the case, when those feelings started to come up, it reinforced some of those thoughts that I was having. So I started to feel really somewhat panicky, somewhat fearful. Oh my God, I messed up, that kind of thing. And I was just trying to figure out, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I thought, okay, she said I could come back. Maybe I'll call her, see if I can get in. I'll leave here. I'll go get some lights and try to fix this. And I thought, okay, wait a minute, just hold on. And I ended up getting out of there, still feeling some of that. It did kind of dissipate a little bit, but it was pretty intense. So I left there. Fortunately, the next place I went into and tried something on, the dressing room lighting was a little bit better, so it didn't look quite as bad. And then when I was checking out, the person checking me out, she actually commented on my hair and told me that she thought that it looked really nice. And I just kind of looked at her because I thought, yeah, you're just saying that because you're used to having to prop women up in these kinds of stores. Yeah, I did have that thought. And I think there is some truth to that sometimes. But she could tell by the look on my face that because like the way I said thank you, maybe I was like, okay, well, thank you. And she said, I used to own my own salon and I think it looks really nice. I don't know what you don't like about it, but I think it looks really nice. And so the better lighting, the comment from her helped a little bit. So I'm still thinking, I wonder if I should call and try to go in, because this is about a half hour away from my house too. So ultimately I decided against calling her because I kept talking myself through it and recognizing, okay, it's blown out straight, which I don't really like anymore. And it always makes the color look drastically different than it does when it's natural curled. And anyway, so I go home, and on my way home, as I'm driving home, I'm just thinking about how that happened, like how everything felt to me, and being really surprised and trying to understand what happened, what really created that. And I recognized all that familiarity, and I also recognized that along with that, part of the feeling that I was experiencing was shame. Now, let's go back to the points that I pointed out as to why, or that they might be important. I had been already questioning myself, so there was some self-doubt present, right, for like a couple of years. Making the decision was a big decision that I wasn't 100% certain of. I'm feeling more anxious as she's walking back and thinking that I'm making a mistake. I'm going off to get an outfit to an event that I wasn't too nervous about, but it was definitely there. This was my first public event for quite some time, speaking. It was a group of people that I've never spoken to before, and a group of very vulnerable people. And so there was some vulnerability around that, just in terms of it being something new, feeling a little uncertain, that sort of thing. And then, as a lot of you can probably relate, having to go shop for something, all of that, right? So with that fear that came up, with the, oh my God, I've done something wrong, shame ended up coming up with that. And part of the reason that all of that kind of tied together and became really familiar is because, in part at least, not solely, but part of it, part of a layer that was added to it, is some of those feelings came up for me when I was in 7th grade. I didn't get to go get my hair cut very often at all. As a lot of you may know, we didn't have a lot of money, and I don't really know who typically cut my hair. I just don't remember. I think my grandma might have cut it a few times. But I was in 7th grade and I wasn't liking my hair. I never did like my hair. And I was going to be going to the mall to meet a group of friends and my boyfriend. And my hair was driving me crazy and I wanted to get a cut. My mom said no. And so I made the really big mistake of wetting my hair, pulling it down, and cutting. I know probably some of you are cringing at that because you know exactly where I'm going. Yeah, big mistake. By the time I was done, and I just wanted to cut my bangs, I ended up cutting a little bit more than that to try to make it work. But by the time I was done, my bangs, I think, were like probably to here. And I'm not actually exaggerating. Needless to say, I was mortified. I was so embarrassed. I really can't believe I actually ended up going to the mall. I'm really surprised I did that. But I ended up going, and it was an incredibly uncomfortable circumstance. Nobody said or did anything wrong or bad or anything like that, but just internally, I definitely was not feeling good. And some of those feelings, like I had most recently, they were the same. Like, I should have known better. What was I thinking? You should just live with it. You made like just all kinds of thoughts. And a lot of those thoughts were similar. And this may not be relatable to you, but I know for a lot of people, I would say particularly maybe women or maybe even women with longer hair, that there can be a lot tied up into hair in terms of vulnerability and perception and worthiness and lots of different kinds of things, which is very unfortunate. But so there was a lot of familiarity in that experience. So on my drive home, as I'm reflecting on all of this, I'm still feeling like I made a huge mistake and I'm not sure what I'm going to do about it and that sort of thing. But I was able to put all the pieces together and recognize what happened. Again, still wasn't feeling very good about it, but I recognized, I was able to see it instead of be in it. And so I recognized all of that, which was really helpful. So when I came home, I decided I was going to just completely wet my hair again and style it natural and see if that made a difference. Because the rational part of my brain was not so much in charge in those early stages when I was freaking out about it, but on the way home, my rational self got a little bit more involved, and I was able to really acknowledge the reality that it really can look quite different when it's natural, curly, and just talk myself through some things. So I came home, I wet it, I styled it, and it looked very different. I even went to a window where the light was really shining in, and I took a selfie to look at it to see if it looked as bad as I thought it really did. And it looked a lot better than I thought that it did. Didn't look nearly as light as I thought it did. And I noticed that, because it looked to me initially like I had none of my original hair color. Like, so the silver, the ash, the pepper, or my darker, warmer hair. It looked like none of that was present. And I didn't want any of that to go away. I just wanted it all blended together. But initially it looked like none of that was there anymore. So in the selfie, I was able to see, okay, it actually isn't as different as I thought it was. So I felt completely better. And then over the next few days, as I got a little bit more used to it, I was fully okay with it. So, but the awareness, the experience, and then the awareness about it was really interesting, because I have not felt shame about something like that, or about anything really, but like to that degree especially, in quite some time, literally years, probably well over a decade. I think that would be true. Now, I have had moments where I've really kind of doubted myself and that sort of thing, but not to that degree. Like, that sort of overall response, I haven't had something like that happen in quite a long time, thankfully. But the reason that I was able to get through that in the way that I did had nothing really ultimately to do with the fact that I ended up thinking my hair looked okay. Certainly that might have helped a little bit, but by that point I could have recognized that, okay, I could just go in and have her do what she said she could do, or I could even go to somebody else or whatever. It wasn't about that. But being able to see how all of that played out, that happened because of the healing work that I've done at different stages along my journey. And that's something that I think is really important for anybody to really understand about what healing is and what it isn't. Because there are going to be things that come up in life, and you've heard me say this so many times. Sometimes it might be something that is really, really significant that can cause you to feel like it's kind of shaking your foundation. And sometimes it could be something like just feeling like you made a mistake with your hair or your outfit that you wore somewhere, or the choice you made in what to order for dinner, right? None of those later things that I just mentioned are really that significant when we look at the big picture. But depending on a lot of factors, ordering the wrong thing for dinner can be something that creates an experience within us that can make us feel like everything that we've worked so hard for just completely disappears. And that can happen because of the levels, the layers of vulnerability that are present. And I shared all of those pieces with you to give a real life example of how seemingly really insignificant things, even good things, can create that vulnerability, right? Like me being asked to go speak to these people, that's an honor and something I was excited about. I was really looking forward to, and I really wasn't even very nervous. I had moments and a little bit of doubt, like, are they going to regret having me come and that sort of thing? But it wasn't strong. It wasn't something that I worried about. But again, it was new. I was a little uncertain, something I hadn't done before. So even something good creates some vulnerability. Even though I had thought about it for probably 2 years, in that moment, I was still feeling a little uncertain, doubting myself, doubting my decision. And that creates vulnerability too. So fortunately, none of the vulnerability that was created was because of anything bad. And if it is about something that's really difficult going on in your life, the depth of vulnerability is going to be even more significant. And one of the things that was helpful for me being able to move through it in the way that I did is being mindful of how I was responding on a cognitive, intellectual level to what I was feeling. So oftentimes when we start feeling a lot of something, we are critical of ourselves, right? We might say, you're overreacting. What are you doing? This is ridiculous. All kinds of things like that, right? Like certainly not helpful things to make us feel better. It only adds to it and makes us feel even worse. And fortunately, again, because of healing, I didn't do that. I was still feeling a lot that wasn't feeling good, but I wasn't adding that on top of it. Another thing is being able to take in the reality that, okay, these lights, I'm sure, are probably not helping any, even though I was still feeling like it was bad enough, even if the lights were good. I was able to recognize, okay, the lights are probably making a little bit of a difference. When I went to the second place and the lighting was a little bit better, being able to take that in, right? Like instead of just focusing on, no, the first one was the only correct one and everything else isn't going to matter, I was able to recognize, okay, it looks different here, so maybe it's really not as bad. Even though I doubted whether the person who complimented my hair did it because she just really thought it looked good, or just because that's what she does. She tries to find something complimentary about everybody that she's checking out, registered checking out. Even though I know that that can happen, I still chose to take it in and accept that maybe she really did think it looked okay. I don't know. I have no reason necessarily specifically to distrust her, other than just knowing that that can happen. But even if it can, is it possible that she might have thought it looked good? Well, I certainly couldn't say it wouldn't be possible, even if I didn't think so. So I was able to take in those things during that entire process. And that is what healing means. It doesn't mean we're not going to struggle. It doesn't mean it may not have a significant effect on us. And again, the more significant the thing is that's happening in our lives, the more we're likely going to feel about it, or the harder it's going to feel. Because I fully recognize that coloring my hair and not liking it in the scheme of life is definitely not the most significant thing. And I think that's also part of the reason I wanted to share this with you, because I think sometimes people can feel like, I shouldn't feel this way. It's not that big of a deal. There's a lot of other worse things going on in the world. And it's absolutely true. There are probably a lot worse things going on in the world. There are absolutely a lot worse things going on in the world than me not liking my hair. But it doesn't take away from the reality that we feel what we feel when we feel it. That we still sometimes can feel the fear, feel the panic, feel the shame, worry. All of those things can still creep in. But as you continue to practice, those practices become a natural part of how you begin to respond to things that are going on. So I hope hearing my tale of panic and shame and self-doubt and my horrible 7th grade haircut that did eventually grow out, thankfully. I hope that helps you maybe be a little bit more gentle with yourself, to recognize that when you are finding yourself struggling, there's no hierarchy of what should or shouldn't make you struggle. I feel very fortunate that I was in a place that I was when I had that experience, because it didn't continue to affect me. By the time my hair was dry, after I came home and wet it down and restyled it, I wasn't really even thinking about it anymore. Other than I did find myself occasionally reflecting on the whole experience in terms of my reaction to it. And that's what begins to happen. And for some of you that have been on this healing journey for a little while, you've had some of those experiences in which you've had maybe a stronger response to something, but then have been able to work your way through it in a way that you might not have been able to before. Maybe not as quickly as you would like, but quicker than you might have before. And that's healing. And that's what you are doing every day that you are practicing. So, can you relate to anything that I shared? Did you have any really bad middle school haircuts yourself? Yeah, I still cut my hair sometimes after that, but definitely not wet first, or certainly not pulling it down and then cutting above my fingers. But I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts or reactions or stories in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe and click the bell for notifications. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.